All right. So last week, because we had to kind of make up a little bit for the previous week, which we had missed, last week we spent quite a bit of time talking about the different authentication checks, all the helpers we built in order to deal with whether or not the user was logged in as an administrator or whether just authenticated, period. So we had all those checks in place, and we had to make sure all that was working. And then we got finally to the point where we could edit a user. However, we didn't finish that whole process. There's a couple of things we need to do to finish that process. One, we need the update script, which is what actually creates the user, actually edits and updates the user. And then we also need to be able to destroy the user. That's the other factor. So I'm thinking that will probably take us to about 9 o'clock or so, and then we'll call it a night at 9. So instead of having any breaks, we're just going to actually work straight through the breaks, and then we'll just end early. Fair deal? All right, cool. So I do believe, did we create an administrative account each, or does that not ring a bell? Did we create administrators? We did create administrators? Okay. But Haiti, you don't remember creating an administrator? Maybe we did. All right. Why don't we create one that will be easy to remember? Good plan. All right, let's go to register inside our app. So open up WAMP. We're still working on the same lesson we were doing last week. Open up WAMP. In your browsers, make sure you navigate to localhost /comp-1006. And we're working on lesson 5 Wednesday. Next week we'll be working on lesson 6. Sorry, not lesson 5 Wednesday. You guys are just working on lesson 5. I'm working on lesson 5 Monday. Once you get there, we'll go ahead and register a brand new user. And I really don't care what the first name or last name is. If you want to do something funny, go for it. I'm going to create a user called Humphrey Bogart, who was a famous person from the 20s and 30s. And we're all going to create the same email address. That way it's super easy. It's going to be admin, so ADMIN, at test.com. So everybody create the same email address, admin at test.com. And the password is going to be the same password for everybody. It's going to be test, T-E-S-T, T-E-S-T. You'll know you did it right if your avatar looks exactly like my avatar. So it'll be admin at test.com. Oh, it's a heavy-duty ASP class when you're talking about SWOT analysis. Oh, he's doing MVC too. Hopefully that works out. You guys get that class next, or do you have that class this semester? Are you doing ASP.NET this semester? Next semester? Yeah. So you guys will do MVC in that class, Model View Controller, which will be nice. All right, so it's admin at test.com. Your password is test. Test and test. Your first and last name can be whatever you want. I don't care. Totally up to you. And then once you're done, go ahead and click submit. And I already have an admin.test.com, so that's fine. You guys should get your user was created successfully and not the error message that I get. All right. Once you have your user, go ahead and log in. So admin at test.com. And your password is test. Hit submit, and you should log in. Now, I've got issues. I'm not sure why. Got tons of issues, actually. Keyboards wasn't working there for a second. Let me go figure out why this is blowing up for me. It's saying that I have the user already, but I don't actually remember making the user. Sort by email. Oh, I bet you their password is bizarre. I bet you I did their password as ASDF, probably. Yep, that's exactly what I did. That's okay. I can go ahead and edit this user when I'm finished. All right, so here's our administrative account. We're using this because it'll be easy for us to switch between users and that, and I want to be able to switch between the users. And we know that a general user can't do that. General users can only see themselves or see their own profile. They're limited to what they're able to do, right? So last week when we were building out our edit form, we were just changing the word show in our URL to edit, and then it would come to this page. Obviously, that's not the easiest way to get there. It's kind of inconvenient, right? It would make a lot more sense to create a link that would allow us to get there in a much easier fashion. And I'm thinking the best way to do that is from the profile page. We'll add a link to the bottom of the profile page that says edit, and then that will allow us to go edit ourselves or edit the user that we're currently on, okay? So let's go ahead and open up our project folder. So if you click on the WAMP symbol, go to the www directory. That'll open up the folder for the Apache directory that gets served. We'll go to comp-1006. That will show you all of your lesson folders. We'll open up our IDE. Don't worry about whatever project's currently in there. And then we'll just drag our lesson folder into our IDE and drop it. And then that will open up our IDE's lesson. And last week we finished by adding a var dump with post on our update.php, and we did that just so we could be sure that the information we had typed into the form was actually getting spit out to the browser. So the page we're going to edit is show.php, which is under the users. So go ahead and open up show. And right now we only have one show, so that's kind of handy. You can do Control P and use the index search for it. And we're going to want to scroll down to, I'm thinking the best place to put the links are just under this block here. That makes the most amount of sense to me. So we're going to scroll down to where we have this little table. And the table's kind of open, so I'm just going to bring my cursor over to the left side of the table on line 47. And I'm going to click that little arrow to collapse the table down. It's not gone. We haven't deleted any code. It's called code folding. You'll notice that we go from line 47 to line 66 now. It just jumps in a big line. It's because all that code is nicely folded up. So we're going to wind up resulting in two actual links. We're going to have an edit link, and then we're going to have a delete link, right? So we'll be able to edit the user or delete the user when we're finished. Yippee skippy, right? We could put a paragraph here. Paragraph's a decent block element, and then we could just shove the two A links in there, or we could use a div. I don't really care either way. Why don't we just use a paragraph? It makes sense to me. Not sure if you noticed this, but when you're typing out HTML, VS Code comes with Emmet installed, and sometimes you'll see this little wrench, and it'll say an Emmet abbreviation. So if you type the letter P, right, and it highlights that, you can either hit Enter or just hit Tab, and it will auto-create the element for you, which makes it a lot easier when you're trying to type out tons of HTML. All right, so I'm going to split these apart because we're going to write two A links in there. We'll just create them one at a time as we build out our project, though. This first A link is going to be called edit. That'll be the label we use. And then the href will obviously point to what we're editing, right? So in our usual fashion, we'll do an inline echo statement of the base path. It's going to point to users, edit, question mark, ID equals. And then what's really awesome is we already fetched the user in our show page. So we already have the user record available to us. So we don't need to fetch the user again. If I want to access the user ID, just like you can see up there where it says user avatar, all I have to do is user ID, right? And I've got that same information that I need. So right there, I'm going to do another inline PHP statement. Whoops. $user, spelled correctly, ID. And there we go. We have a nice link. So every profile page we look at will give us a different user ID. It'll be whatever user we're currently viewing. That link will customize itself based on the user profile we're currently looking at. So this link will change depending on the user we're looking at. And in case you forget, that question mark ID equals is known as a query parameter. Basically, this winds up in our URL. And then we can use $_get, this get super global, to fetch that argument. All right. Kind of a chunk to write, that's for sure. There's quite a bit there. Give me a second to finish that off. Want to add an icon? And why not, right? Let's add an icon, make it look a little prettier. Put your cursor next to the word edit, like the E. Hit enter so it comes down to the next line. And we'll put the closing on the last line so that we have edit right there in the middle. We're going to make this icon. We're going to make a little pencil. So, pencil before or after? I don't really care. Before? Okay. So right here, type I, hit tab. So it creates an italics tag, which has no value these days. We're going to add a style class to it, class equals. And I've already way back in like lesson 3, we added font awesome to our page. You probably don't remember, but we did. Font awesome has all these little glyphs that we can add as icons, which are pretty cool. We just have to give it the class name. So it starts off with FA for font awesome, space, and then the name of the icon. So FA dash pencil is the one we're going to use. And that'll put a little pencil right before our edit. Wait a minute, Haiti, that's not your old laptop. Did you get a new laptop?
No, it is Diego's laptop.
Oh, I see. So Diego's fighting with your laptop. Gotcha. So all this is going to do is produce this little pencil icon for us. Are we good? Yep, awesome. Let's jump over to the page here. All we have to do on our show page, or just click the My Profile link again, and you should see the edit button at the bottom there with a nice little pencil icon next to it. So if you hover over that, at the very bottom of the page in the left-hand corner, this is called your status bar, by the way, you should see the link that was generated. If you did it correctly, that link should have a number. Should say edit ID equals 26 or whatever number you happen to have. If you see a bunch of PHP that you typed, check your echo statement and make sure you didn't put a space in it. Click edit. Should go to the form. The form should populate with the details of that user. Test it with another user as well, right? Go to users, view all users, and choose one of the users that we already have. I'm going to choose Donnie. There we go. We've got Donnie's details. I'm going to click edit, and now I can see Donnie's details in the edit form. I mean, it's just a link, but it definitely makes our lives a lot easier than having to edit the URL every time we want to move around. Yeah, you certainly can. This is the code we're typing. Yes. Yep. Ooh, object not found. Go back to the page. Hit your back button for a minute. Hover over edit for me. So that's going to users edit ID less than 5. Concatenation 1006. Click on it. Is it the file? I don't have anything. So this is the file, right? Yeah, it's edit. Yeah, that's correct. That's not the issue. Let's go take a look at your config further down. Okay. What does your folder structure look like? Can you show me the folder structure in Finder? I think that's why. See how, go back a level, see how Comp 1006 is in capitals? So Mac and Linux care about that. Windows doesn't. Windows doesn't care at all. But Mac and Linux are very strict about case sensitivity. All of your links point to a lowercase version of Comp 1006, but your folder is capitalized. So either you got to rename that folder, or probably easier, just change it in the config there. Where it says Comp 1006, just make that comp capital. And then save it. Come back to your browser, go back a page, refresh entirely, hover over that link, click on it. That's super weird. Localhost comp-1006 /-05 users. What's under just users? Like remove the edit ID3 and all that. Log out. Did you create an administrative user? Okay, log in as your administrative user. Should be admin@test.com and then test. Okay. So your user is not an administrator. So click the little plus sign. I forgot to change that. Yeah, actually we all need to do this. Sorry guys. We created the user, but we didn't actually make them an administrator. Let's go to localhost /phpMyAdmin. Everybody needs to go here. We need to, and then log in. Your password's you have no password and your username is root. Once you're in, click on your Comp 1006 database. and then click on the users table. The easiest way to do this is to sort the columns. Just click on email so that A's are at the top. So the email address we want to look for is the admin@test.com email address. We want to turn this person into administrator because for you guys, their role is general. We want to make it admin, right? So the way we change it, we double click the role. It'll give you this little pop-up box with a drop down. Click on the drop down and change it from general to admin. And then once you've made that change, click off, anywhere off, and it will save it. And now you have an administrative user. Now, the annoying thing though, because when we get the user, we store the user into our session, that session has no link back to our database. It doesn't know anything about this change. So in order for the user that's logged in to take effect, we have to log out and log back in again, and then we'll have the role. So once again, you want to find admin@test.com, double click on their role, select admin from the list, and then click anywhere on the screen and it will save. Once you've completed that step, go back to your browser, to your application, and click log out. So we've logged out. And then we'll log back in as our administrator. So admin@test.com, test, submit. Only mine's not actually test. And once you've logged in, you will know you're an administrator because you will see the users. If you don't see the users option, you are not an administrator. Okay? You need to see this. If you don't see this, you're not an administrator. You guys administrators? Nice. Are you administrators? Awesome. 80, are you an administrator?
Yes.
Awesome. Diego, good? Everybody else good? Anybody not good? Alrighty, cool. Now, if you were having any issues with your edit, try your edit now and see if it works. Still object not found? That's super bizarre. Try restarting your server. I mean, your folders are where they're supposed to be, your files are where you're supposed to be, so the only thing I can think of is you have some sort of weird caching thing that's going on with your file structure. All right, so we can go ahead and change information about our administrator if we want to. And I mean, why not? It's ours, right? Why don't we change the first name and last name? So just choose a new first name and a new last name. And what we're going to do is these three fields, the first name, last name, and email, must have data in them. The way this works, and it's kind of interesting, the way this works is we submit this form to the back end, and even if you don't change these fields, we update them in the database. It's called a nuke and pave. Basically, we take whatever data is currently in that record, and we wipe it and write over top of it. And that's called nuke and pave. So we're not going to check to see if any of this information has changed because we don't care, right? We're writing once. It takes just as long to write those fields once as it would to have to check them and make sure that they're not, already changed or whatever. So we're just going to write right over top. Where we are going to perform a little bit of a logic check is on the password. The way we're going to do it is if the user puts a password in there, then we will change the existing password with that password. If they leave these blank, then we'll just leave the password as whatever it currently is. Is that a great user experience? No, not really. It would be better to have like a password reset kind of operation, but for now, for simplicity, this will work. All right. If you click submit, it should go to the update page. So it should go to users update.php, and you should see the structure of the data that we sent from the form now that it's been converted to a post object, right? So that's what it looks like in the post. Cool. So this update is kind of an interesting script. Let's open up update.php. Update needs to do the same operations as create does. It needs to validate the data from the user. It needs to sanitize the data to strip out any possible script tags that might get injected in cross-site scripting. And it needs to normalize the data by removing white space from the beginning and end of lines and stuff like that. So we have to validate, sanitize, and normalize. Same thing we did in create.php. We have to do error handling, just like we did in create.php. A lot of the operations are identical to what we did in create.php. However, it's a blend of two strategies. It's a blend of create.php, but also show.php, because we need to fetch the user that we want to edit in order to verify some of the information we need to verify. Like, for example, that the user exists, right? And we're not just trying to update some arbitrary record that's not in our database. We also need to verify that the email that they're editing is their email, right? We also need to verify that they are who they are and they're editing themselves and not somebody else, unless they're an administrator. So those are pieces that we need to make sure we have in place. That is definitely not what I want. Let me just open up my notes. I mean, we could wing it. Nothing wrong with that, that's for sure. All right, let's get rid of this var dump. That's step one. Goodbye, var dump. We don't need you anymore. Step two, every file we create in our application needs to include the config file. That is super important. The config file gives us our normalized paths for including and also our normalized paths for links, right? Hence root, hence base path. So let's do that first. Let's include and we only want to include it once. That way we don't accidentally duplicate it. And because we're going to be working quite a bit with our session in this scenario, because we have our logged in user, which we will need to verify who they are. We'll also need to check to see if they're an administrator, if they're trying to edit somebody else, that kind of stuff. Let's go ahead and start our session, because it's probably not a bad idea. So if the session status is currently equal to PHP session none, then let's do a session start. Our first step is going to be to validate. Once we have validated, we're going to sanitize. Those are our first two steps. Validation is actually going to take a bit more of a process because we want to validate non-connected data. So we don't want to have to reach to the database yet. First, we want to just check and make sure things that need to exist. So because we're doing a new first name, last name, and email cannot be empty. They have to exist. If any of those three items are empty, we can't possibly update the record. So our first validation is quite simple. We want to check that those three things are not empty. Either you could do them one at a time, which is tedious, or we can do a variable that is equal to an array with the field names that we want to check and make sure are not empty. So there's our array. Now all we have to do is iterate through that array, right? And check each one to see if they're empty against the post. So we'll write a for each loop, pass it the required, have each item get passed into a alias variable called field, and we'll do a check. If empty, $_post $field. So the first time this executes, this will be $_post first name, right? Which in my scenario will be Humphrey. If it's empty, then my first step is to make the name nicely human readable. So I'll replace this underscore with a space. So find the underscore, replace it with a space in the side field. And then I want to make all the letters in this capital. So I'll say formatted equals UC words $formatted. So now they're capital letters. And I'll add to errors a nicely formatted string. $formatted cannot be empty. Very similar to what we did in create.php, except for instead of listing these as required, I think all we did was iterate over the post variable. We might not have. In one of the classes, I iterated over the post variable. I don't remember which one. One thing to note, I'm going to have an error. I'm trying to access this errors variable, but I haven't actually defined it as an array yet. Kind of not a smart idea. So let's make sure we have that as an array. So we'll need to define it before everything. Just put it above required. So 8 lines of code, as opposed to us having to write, multiple lines to deal with each one of our required statements. Next, we want to kind of make sure, so this is checking to see if anything is empty. So let's write that as a comment. Check to see if requireds are empty. So we want to see if any of that is empty. The next one is verify email format. That's our next one. Want to check and see if the email is in the correct format. So if not, filter var $_post email, comma, filter validate email, and $errors equals your email. Oops. Your email is not in a valid format. Now, often when you start developing systems, you'll be asked to, do the whole complete process, including error handling, right? So I wrote, your email is not in a valid format, and I'm writing out that first name cannot be empty, last name cannot be empty, and email cannot be empty. It is very important, especially if you have issue with grammar or spelling, to make sure you check your grammar and spelling before you write these messages, because the business people who are going to sell your application have no way to edit that, right? They're not going to go into your code and go look for this and change it out. This is not something they'll do. I did do a site for one company, and it was super annoying, but they wanted it so that they could change these error values because they didn't like what I was writing. They wanted to write something more quirky and funny and interesting, right? They didn't want that kind of dry programmer speak. So basically, everywhere I created an error, I had to add in a little config location for it so that I could load in their error message for each one. Super tedious, very annoying. Sometimes you can get away with just writing what you want to write just by making sure that it sounds okay, that it kind of sounds like whatever brand you're working with. All right, so we have formatted cannot be empty. Your email is not in a valid format. I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Our next check, actually it's not our next check. Our next step is basically to say, okay, if any of this information is a problem, then we definitely need to kick back to the user, say, fix your stuff, none of this is correct, and then try again to resubmit. So this is a good point to actually handle some error handling here. We're going to be writing this error message so many times that I kind of feel like it would be much easier to just turn it into a function. You know what? Let's keep it simple. We'll just keep writing it out. If you want to turn it into a function, though, please do. Okay. So handle our errors is our next step. I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Hopefully not too far. So our first step is to count the number of errors we have. So count errors and see if they're greater than 0, because if they are greater than 0, we have errors. If we have errors, we want to make sure we create a new flash message for them. So we'll add our flash message. Danger. And we'll just literally make it equal to the errors. We'll want to push back our form data. So that the form data will repopulate the form. And then in my notes here, I have like the header thing where we have to header and relocate and all that type of stuff. But we created a function to handle all that for us. A function that will not only relocate the user, but also exit the page. It was called redirect, right? We wrote that a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to write redirect here. Redirect just needs a location to go to, so we're going to go to base path dot /users /edit dot php id equals, and then we can write the $_post id directly in there, which is coming from the form. That'll redirect and exit. Yep. Will we be given the correct data back? What do you mean?
Like
and we have the errors only on the one position and other fields are correct.
So if you have errors on any of those fields, when we send the user back to the page, all of the fields will be whatever they had originally typed in. So we have to make a small change because right now, the way edit works, right? So here's edit. This is our page. We're plugging in a user into it, right? But now we have this form data which are their changes, right? So this is whatever user is currently stored in the database. This currently contains their changes. When we put this in, we need it to basically go question mark. If this exists, load that into the form. Otherwise, load the user into the form, right? And I can't remember if we did that already in this class and fixed that. I don't think we did. So likely what's going to happen is whatever changes we've made are going to get blown away by the user. So we need to make it so it doesn't do that. So yeah, we're going to change that. We'll have to change that at the top of the edit.php page. So we'll change that in a minute once I know everybody's kind of caught up and ready to go here. Whereabouts are we? What line number are we on? Katie, what line number are we on? Good? Okay. So I'm going to jump over to the page and we'll just see where we're at. So I'll go back to my form and refresh. Change my form to Humphrey, Bogart, but I'm going to take my email out and make it blank. So I'm forcing an error, right? Because I have to have an email for this to work. I'm going to hit submit. And got a call to undefined function redirect. So I guess we never actually wrote any helpers in this class. I thought we did write helpers. But it looks of it we did not. Let me double check that though, because I could have sworn we did that in every class. Oh, I have authentication helpers, but I don't have the other type of helpers. So why don't we open up authentication helpers.php and we'll write a very quick redirect function so that we don't have to write out the big header information every time we want to do a redirect. So open up authentication helpers.php, and at the very bottom we're going to write a new function called redirect. It's going to take a path, and it's going to literally do the same thing that the other functions above are doing. We're going to do that. That's going to make our lives a little bit easier. Not much. We'll shave off 2 lines of code and make it 1 line of code, really is all it's going to do for us. This is a common thing that you will find yourselves doing as programmers. As you find yourself typing out a huge block of code over and over again, it should tell you, it should trigger something in your mind to say, there has to be a better way, right? There has to be a better way than me typing this out over and over again. You'll really learn that hard lesson when you've typed it out over and over again and somebody comes along and says, yeah, I don't want it to work like that. I want it to work like this. And now you've got to go find the 15 spots you typed out that code and go correct it, right? Whereas if you define it as a function and just call that function in those locations, if somebody changes what this function needs to do, all you have to do is change it in one place, right? You don't even have to go to the 15 locations where the function exists. You just need to change it in the one location, and that is smarter, right? So just keep that in mind. That's known as being dry. Don't repeat yourself. Definitely the programmer's mantra. All right, we good? Anybody not good? All right. Katie, good? Yep. So this function, it's redirecting to a path. So redirect means the page you are currently on, I am now sending you to somewhere else. That's what a redirect is. The way we redirect in PHP is we call the header function that's built into PHP, and we set a location for you to go. So, for example, in our update.php page, I'm not going to display the error from there because it doesn't make sense to, because they'll just hit refresh, right? I want to take the user from the update.php page. I want to put them back on the form page and make them fix whatever the problem is. The only way I can do that is by relocating where they are, and that's exactly what's happening here. Header location path, the path is where I want them to go to, right? Where I want to send them back to. Exit will force whatever script we're currently in to stop processing. It'll just exit out of that script entirely, which we need because in update.php, for example, we're going to have other code below this that will update the user and modify the user and everything else. If we don't exit, what will happen is that script will continue to process. We'll send the user back to the form. The form will say there was an error, but that script is still processing on the server, meaning it will go ahead and update the user and will create a whole bunch of issues, right? So we need to make sure we have exit. Redirects are very, very fundamental in every web application you'll ever encounter. Usually, if you're using a framework, they'll already have a redirect function built, and you won't have to create one. PHP, because we're not using a framework, we have to kind of build our own redirect function. So this redirect base path users edit.php now will work. The path that we're going to is users edit.php ID, and we're putting in this post ID thing for ourselves. So if I refresh, it should work now. There we go. It redirects back to this page, and it says, email cannot be empty. Your email is not in a valid format. However, look at the URL. Notice that the form is blank and that the URL is missing the required number. That means that in that post object that we're sending back to update.php, we are missing a very, very important field telling us which current user we're working with and editing. So we need to go fix that. So we're going to go to form.php, so users form.php. Put your cursor at the end of line 7. And we're going to create a tiny piece of logic here. We're going to say if is set $action. So if the action variable is set, PHP and if. So I'm going to write those 2 lines. I'll even space them out for you so you can easily see them. If the action variable is set, I know that I'm editing. Because I know that I'm editing, I need to put in the user's ID that I am currently working with so that that information will go to update. Remember I told you that get variables and post variables only last for one request, which means, yes, I have the get variable available to me here, but when we go to update.php, that variable is gone, and I have no idea which user we're editing. I know nothing about the user, right? And while I could probably rely on their email address to find them, I would much prefer to have the ID, because the ID is unique, guaranteed to be unique, and I can identify them with the ID. So all I need to do is make sure that I add the ID to the post, to the form. However, if I'm doing a create script and I'm creating a new user, I don't have any user information because I haven't created the user yet, right? So I don't need that input on the create side of it. I only need it on the edit side. So we're going to create a new input inside this condition. It'll be type hidden so that you can't see it. So it'll just be below. You'll be able to see it in the source code, but you won't be able to see it on the surface. I need to give it a name. ID, I think, works. And a value. And the value will be the retrieved user, which will be $_get ID. We'll just use the ID that we got from the user ID. So we're basically forcing this value to live on for another request. We're taking the value and we're just turning it into a new post value. So now we can use that inside our form to be able to see who the user is, retrieve the user, all that type of stuff. So just these 3 lines, just line 9, 10, and 11 is what you're typing. Oh, it would help if I ended the actual input. I didn't add the closing bracket at the very end. Need to make sure we add that closing bracket down there. So the good news is that create, edit, update, all those type of things, when we start dealing with resources that have really nothing to do with the user, go a lot quicker. It's a little easier to actually do the edits and updates that we need to do. All right. Anybody still typing that out? No? Nice. Jump back here. Click on your profile so that it jumps back to your profile. Click on edit. I'm going to change my name, Humphrey Bogart. And I'm going to clear my email address to force an error. And I'm going to click submit. And it's going to say email cannot be empty. Your email is not in a valid format. However, like we were just talking about, you will notice that Humphrey and Bogart did not come back. Instead, I have admin, right? And the reason that is because of this issue. We, at the top of our file in edit.php, are grabbing the user that we're requesting, and we're populating the data in the form with that user's information. We haven't accounted for what happens if the user creates an error and has a problem, and we send the data back. We haven't accounted for that. We need to make error data take precedence over user data. Sounds more complex than it is. It's actually really simple. It's only a couple of more lines that we need to add. Jump back to your editor, go to edit.php, and it's right here that we're looking at. See where we have $session form data equals $user? In front of the $user, we're going to add $_session form data or user. We're adding that chunk of information. So basically what that says, if there is already form data, if it already exists, then use it. If it does not, then use the user. Okay? So if we send back that post data, we'll populate the form data with the post data that the user submitted. Otherwise, we'll populate it with their user data. That's basically it. Make sure you save that. Make the little circle go away. That's on edit.php under line 13-ish. Should be around line 13. All right, we good? That was like 15 characters, so we should be good. All right, I'm going to jump over to the browser. Try this again. Humphrey Bogart. Get rid of my email address. Submit. Yay! Humphrey Bogart stays. In fact, everything I've done to the form stays. I'm missing my email address, so I can type in a new email address. The next check is to see if I do type in the email address, meaning that all 3 fields have data, right? And I hit submit, I should get a blank page because we haven't written that logic yet, right? Sure enough, I get a blank page, which means we're good. We just haven't written the rest of the logic yet. We're past that redirect. Cool. Let's go back to update.php and finish this thing. So our next step is a little bit of sanitization that we need to do, right? We're going to sanitize our email address and we're going to sanitize our first and last name. And we'll also sanitize the post ID. The reason why we're sanitizing now before we've actually finished all our validations, because we still have validations to complete. We still need to check to see if the user exists in the database, because obviously we can't edit a user that doesn't exist. And we need to check to see if the email address they're attempting to change doesn't already exist, which is kind of a little bit of tricky logic, right? Because they're allowed to use their own email address, obviously. But if they're trying to attempt to change another user and the user email address that already exists, we need to tell them that. But we might as well sanitize the data because we're going to be using that data to retrieve the user, right? So if we sanitize it now, we can guarantee that there's no garbage inside of it. So let's come down to line 31-ish, and we will sanitize our data. So we'll literally just overwrite the values that are currently in the post. So the first one we'll do is we'll do the sanitization of the email address. So that's post email, filter, sanitize email. There we go. So that will sanitize the email address. Basically, all that means is that if they typed any JavaScript script characters or even HTML tags or anything like that, they'll rip all those out. We actually verified last week. It will also remove any trailing or preceding spaces or tab characters or new line characters, rips all those out. If you add any like, kind of like these type of things, which are like character codes. If you add character codes, it rips all those out. It basically makes sure that what you're left with is a valid email address and the correct syntax. That's basically what you get left over. So that's our email address. Let's go ahead and validate the other pieces of information we need. So the ID, it needs to be 100% an integer. So there we go. That'll filter it to an integer. The nice thing is actually every value we get back from post comes back as a string, which is kind of annoying because if you try to verify that this is a number, it won't be. It'll be a string, right? However, what this will do is it will take that string and it will cast it to a literal number. So even if it's 5, right, this will still work and you will get 5, the number 5. Right? Not a string 5. So our last 2 steps are to validate the last name and the first name. We could write it as an inline for each loop. I mean, why not? You might as well learn. For each, we'll give it a literal array right in the thing. We won't define it as a variable first. We'll just plug the array right inside. With some very nice super shorthand. And we'll write it this way. I was going to be cheeky and write it on one line, but I think we'll do it this way. Whoops. Where's strings? There it is. There we go. We've sanitized our data. Now, if you want to be cheeky, you can. These braces basically say the thing inside me, inside these wrap things, is the code I need to execute, right? If you only have one line like this, you actually don't need the braces. You can actually eliminate the braces and write the whole thing on one line. That's totally doable. Or you can even hit enter and have it on the next line tabbed in. What will happen is PHP will hit this line and go, oh, okay, so for each thing in this array, as a field, execute the immediately next line. And then it will go back. However, if you add another line in here and you don't have the braces, the following line after this post line will be ignored. It'll be treated as though it was outside the block, right? But you can write that shorthand if you so choose. Almost every language I've ever touched works that way. Like they all do that. So even C++, which is pretty old, right, does the same thing. These braces you don't need if the immediate line afterwards is the only logic you're going to execute. You could even try it in Java. Java's pretty strict though. Might not work in Java, but you could try it. All right, so we've sanitized everything. Our next step is to check if the user actually exists. Because if the user doesn't exist, we're not updating anything, right? Can't update somebody who's not there. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Write a new comment. Get the user. So like any time we get a user, we'll follow those same steps as usual. We'll write our SQL statement. We'll prepare it. We'll bind our values. We'll execute, and then we'll fetch. So it's always that same kind of order of operations. So first, our SQL statement, which by this point, you guys should be so used to writing between the two classes, you have to write it in. Select star from users where ID equals :ID. Did you guys have your SQL class this morning? No? What day is it on? Friday morning? Did you guys learn joins last Friday? Like how to join one table into another? Yeah. You did? Cool. Great. That'll make next week much easier. All right, so our next step is to create our statement, right? So STMT equals $con prepare $SQL. Now we need our connection. We don't have our connection, so let's create our connection. There, so you'll need these two lines as well. That'll grab our connection for us. We'll connect using the function that we created before. Now we're ready to run those two statements. Feel free, if you know what to do, to just jump ahead. You don't have to wait for me if this, at this point, has become muscle memory. So this :ID, when we prepare it, tells PHP that we have a bound parameter and we need to give it a value, right? Otherwise, our execution won't work. It'll blow up and say we have a misalignment in parameters. So we're going to add our bound parameter. Ba-dunk. So $STMT, skinny arrow, bind param, colon ID, because we have to write it exactly as we wrote it in the SQL statement. The value we want to bind, which is ID, and the type of data, if I could use vowels, that we need to cast it as, which is param int. So that will bind the post ID value as an integer and replace this current placeholder with that value for us. Nicely clean and sanitized and casted to its appropriate thing and treated as a literal value. Next, I'm ready to execute. Execute. There we go. Whoop. Let's try to spell that correctly. And then last but not least, let's fetch the user. Hopefully by this point you remember that fetch returns a single row from the database as an associative array, right? Meaning that that row immediately has access to first name, last name, email. It's not nested in any arrays. Fetch all, however, will return a nested array with rows inside of it. So it may have more than one row. So if you use fetch all, you have to iterate. But if we're using fetch, everything we need on this user is there right away. We can go $user first name and grab their name right off the bat, right? Everything we need is already in them. Cool. So we have our user. We have gone through the painstaking process using bound parameters to deal with our user. Now I want to check to see if the email address actually exists, right? But we have to be smart here. We have a couple of things we need to pay attention to. One, only administrators can edit users that are not their own, which we can handle at the top with a simple if condition. So let's forget that for a second. So really it's a matter of if the email address is the same as their current email address, then we don't need to do anything, right? We can just leave it and let it go through. However, if their email address is different than their current email address, we have to check the database and make sure the email address they're trying to register next or change to doesn't already exist. Because if it exists, we don't want to accidentally create two users with the same email address or it will completely euchre our login, right? So let's make sure we go through that process. So we're going to say check if the email exists. So like I said, first we want to see whether or not their email address is even different. So we'll say if $_post email does not equal $user email. And the reason why we're saying $user email here and not the posted email address is because we just want to verify whether these two match. Sorry, not the session email. Is because administrators can change another user, so we can't verify that this is us currently, right? Because let me try that again with actual logic behind it. An administrator can edit another person, right? Everybody understands that concept. Cool. When we're validating whether or not the email address that we added into our form is not the same email address as the user we just retrieved, we could use session_email or user email and check it that way, but the problem is then we're only checking it against the logged in user. That works for a user who is not an administrator, but it doesn't work for a user who is an administrator. This logic will work for both people, right? And then at the top of this whole file, we'll basically just check, are you editing yourself? No. Are you an administrator? No. Cool, get out. Basically is how we're going to deal with that, right? So if the emails don't match, we're going to go check and make sure the email doesn't already exist. And here's where we get to be a little cheeky. This process, this value that we have here, oh, geez, that is not the correct syntax. I am so sorry. That is not the correct syntax. That is the correct syntax. Treating it like an object. This value that is here, this has already been validated, right? We've already bound the parameter. We've already gone through the security checks. We are good. We can rely that any data from this is sanitized and valid. We don't have to worry about this data being corrupt. We only ever need to worry about data from the user being corrupt, right? Because of that, our check to see if the email exists can be nice and simple and sweet. We don't need to worry about sanitizing and binding parameters and all that stuff. So our statement will be, why not just write it inline? I mean, that makes the most amount of sense. Let's do $exist equals $con query, which is a new function. Query will execute whatever SQL you give it. Keep in mind, though, that you're not binding anything here, so don't use query on things that you're checking user data with, right? We're going to say select star from users where email equals, and oh boy, $user email. Yep, we did it, folks. We put it right inside the file, or right inside the line. Another skinny arrow. Fetch, which doesn't quite fit on the line. So what you can do, if it's running off the line and you want to make it nice and neat so that you can see what's happening, you can actually do this, which is kind of cool. Like that. So it's a little easier to read. So we're querying our select star from users where email is user email. I don't need to validate or sanitize that because we already did that, right? This data I can rely on. Fetch will fetch any user row that matches that query. Then I just simply do if exists, that's bad, right? $errors. Hold on, actually. Is there any other checks that we have to do? Oh, that's literally the only check. So why don't we just actually error right out from there? If exists, $_session / danger equals email is taken. Send back the form data. And redirect. Yes, I know this is much easier than having to write out bound parameters. However, on a quiz, on a test, or in your projects, if you do this, and this value you're providing is coming from the user, you will definitely lose marks, right? Because you don't ever trust the user. Never trust the user, okay? But if this value comes from a query that you have already done, that you have already sanitized and already validated, then you won't lose marks. You might gain marks just for being nice and slick like this and not going through that whole process when it's not necessary, right? So make sure you do it properly. Yes. This part here? The other if. Line 53? Oh, yeah, no, you are 100% correct. Yeah, exist is a variable and should be one. Nice catch. Have I done it again somewhere? Oh, yeah, we didn't call it that. Sorry. Yeah, 2 small edits there. Great catch. It's a long day. I make errors. You have to be a little forgiving. I've been writing Ruby and JavaScript all day, and then I come here and write PHP for the evening. Not to mention all of my SQL, Postgres, and Mongo I've been writing all day too. Getting to the point where I'll be happy when I just work in one language and never have to shift. I mean, I have nothing on you international students who have to work in 2, like, actual languages every single day. That's not the same. Programming, at least, is all in one English, right? At least that part is easy. But all right, we're ready to update. I mean, as soon as everybody's caught up, we're ready to actually take the user and update the user and go through that step. We should double check that this stuff actually works. Make sure that if the email is taken that it works, all that type of stuff. We'll do that in a moment though. Actually, let's just update the user. That makes more sense. Now, updating the user, unfortunately, we still have to go through the bound parameter issue because we have to basically still take the user's post information, and that's what we're actually updating the user with, right? So we will have to bind the parameters, prepare the statement, execute it, all that wonderful stuff. But we have one other piece of logic that we have to consider. Our password, right? We're taking for granted right now that the password is empty. However, the password could contain data. If the password has information, we have to do 2 things. 1, we have to validate that the password and the password confirmation match. That's our first step, right? The cool thing is we can just do that regardless if there's information in it or not, because if it's empty, then they obviously match, right? They're both empty. And then the second thing we need to do is if there's data in there, we need to hash the password. We can't forget to hash the password, right? So those are some steps that we need to do. Then we have some issues where our SQL statement is going to require some logic, and we're actually going to have to build our SQL statement. Because if we have a password, our SQL statement is not the same as if we didn't, right? So we're going to have to go through all those steps. So why don't we do that next? So we checked if the email exists. Check if password matches password confirmation. Actually, you know where we should put that? That would make a lot more sense. Not on line 60. Let's scroll up to where we were doing all of our validations. So here where we're verifying our email format, let's do our password check there. Because, I mean, it's super simple. It's basically just if post password does not equal $_post password confirmation. So if those things are not the same, then we'll add an error It says your password must match the password confirmation. So that handles that for us. And we don't care if they're empty. That doesn't matter to us, right? If they're empty, this will still be a false statement, so this error will never happen and we're okay, right? We only care if they actually input some data in there and the two fields don't match. If the two fields don't match, then obviously we want to alert them. It doesn't require us to connect to the database. That's why I put it under the verify email format, because we might as well just handle it right there, right? That's done. We don't have to do anything else. Just make sure you paid attention to that. This is not at the bottom of the page. This is below the verify email format. I just scrolled a little bit. Still a couple of people writing that out. Give them a few seconds to finish that off. In your projects, I don't care if your password reset works so much. I'm not even going to test it. I will test that I can change my first name, last name, and email address. No. I will test that I can change my first name and last name. Okay? So if your email stuff is challenging and doesn't work, that's fine. And if your password stuff is challenging and doesn't work, that's fine as well. But just make sure that I can change my first name and my last name. Okay? Are we good? Thumbs up? Yep. Katie? Close enough? All right. Let's scroll to the bottom. Don't worry, we'll have some time to go over this stuff. So our next step is to actually build out our SQL statements. So unfortunately, we have a few different pieces here. The first thing we need to do is build the default SQL, that no matter what, we're going to have at least this little bit of SQL, right? So that's going to look like this, $SQL. So hold on, let me add a comment. Build our SQL statement. So SQL equals, which is fun to say, update users set, and I like to put these on the next line because I find it kind of annoying when it's all bundled up against each other. First name equal to colon first name, comma, last name equal to colon last name, comma, email equal to colon email, and avatar equal to colon avatar. PHP will let you do this as long as your quote character is beside a letter, right? You can totally get away with what we've done here and write them on multiple lines. Makes it a little bit more legible for us. Comma after where?
After email.
Yes, there should be a comma after email. That is correct. Nice catch. Yeah. My brain was racing ahead and thinking of other things and then forgot to currently stay in the moment.
So I don't understand. So in our project, we have to change the last name and the name of the user.
Yeah. Should be able to edit the last name and first name.
Also the email, the phone.
Nope. As long as I can edit the first name and last name fields, I'm happy. I mean, ideally, you want to make it so you can edit everything, but don't waste tons of time on it. You know, if it doesn't work, Just make it so the page actually still functions if I edit the first name and last name. I have to mark almost 40 projects, 40 or 50 projects, so I want to do those quickly. It's easy for me to just go first name, last name, first name, last name, first name, last name on each one of them and make sure it works.
From administrator has to be.
I should be able to edit my own profile.
But should administrator to be able to change name and first
Yep.
name and last name?
Ideally, they should be able to edit, but it's not something I'm going to check. Yeah. I'm literally going to check that I can edit my own profile. I'm going to check that I can create a new parent resource, and I'm going to check that I can create a child resource. I'm going to check that I can edit both of those, and I'm going to check that I can destroy both of those. Basically, that's it. It even says that in the rubric. All right. So we have a couple of things we need to do here. This avatar, we don't currently have this value. We need to make sure we have that value. So let's go ahead and create that. So actually, hold on. Let's not create that there. Let's finish our build. So our next step is if not empty, $_post password. And it's important you don't use is set. The difference between empty and is set in PHP is quite big, actually. Is set says this thing exists, even if its value is null or an empty string. Is set will return true because this exists, which is a problem for us because our password can be empty, right? So is set would validate as true. Empty says not only does this exist, it is also not null, it is not false, and it is not empty string, right? So it has to have all those. So sometimes, if in doubt, just use empty. Empty is much easier than figuring out what is set is. So we're checking if it's empty. So if the password is not empty, $SQL, and there's two ways we can write this. We can write $SQL equals $SQL again, dot, and whatever we're going to write. But that seems really clunky and not necessary, right? If I have a number and I want to add another number to that number, I can say 1 plus equals 1 in programming. And what that will literally do is take whatever value that is, take its value and add equals another value on top of it. I can do that literally in every programming language ever, okay? Concatenation is the same thing. Concatenation is simply adding two things together. That's all it is, right? The difference is instead of having two numbers get added together, you're combining strings together, right? So I can do the same idea, plus equals whatever. But PHP does not use the plus sign for concatenation. It uses the dot character for whatever ludicrous reason that is. That's what it uses. So I can modify this to dot equals. And that literally says take the current value of SQL and add on whatever string it is you want to add on after. So the string we're going to add is comma space password equals colon password, like so. And what that is basically is if I have a password, I'm now adding to my SQL statement a new set of fields, right, with a bound parameter. And then the last bit of SQL I need to write, $SQL, dot equals, space, don't forget that space, so super important, where ID equals colon ID. And that is our complete SQL statement. This type of logic you will come across in a lot of different applications you build regardless of the language you're working in. This is a common process of having to build out a statement, right? It's like a very small version of the factory pattern. But this whole idea of having to build a statement based on conditions is very, very common, especially when you're working with databases. You could write two complete statements, one that has the password in it and one that doesn't, but I like to be dry, right? The whole concept of dry. All right. We need the avatar in order to bind it. So why don't we get our avatar variable ready? So avatar is equal to http://api.adorable.io. This is where I'm getting all these avatars from. AVATARS 300, which is the size, $_post, email. There we go. That's our avatar link. Oops, sorry, forgot the equal sign. There. That is our avatar link. That will produce those goofy little pictures for us and add them to the database for us. Next, I'm ready to prepare. So create my statement, equals $con, prepare our SQL. Super important step. That prepares our SQL. Now I'm ready to bind all of these wonderful values. And we have a whole bunch of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all together. Only one of them is actually hinged, 6. One is hinged on a password existing, right? So let's do that. So $statement connect, that's done. $stmt, bind param, first underscore name, $_post, first underscore name. And that is a data type of a string, str. Because I am super mondo lazy, there's no way I'm typing that out 7 times or 6 times. So Alt-Shift down, double click on first name, Control-D to get the next one, change them both at the same time. Alt-Shift down, double click on one, Control-D, email. Alt-Shift down, gonna do the ID one Control-Z. Alt-Shift down, there we go. Gonna do ID, but this time the one change is it's not a param string, it's a param int. Alt-Shift down, avatar, and replace this with $avatar, and it is a string. And then last but not least, if not empty, $_post password, because we only want to bind this if the password is not empty. $stmt, bind param, password, password hash, $_post password, password default, PDO, param, string. Kind of a mouthful, that one. And then our very end point is $stmt, execute. So that will actually update our user. If we have a password, we will hash our password using the default password operation, and we will guarantee that it is a string by binding it. So it's a function call within a function call. Everything else is fairly normal. Just the password part is a little bit tricky. And then at the very end, $_session slash success square brackets equals user was updated successfully. Redirect, base path. And the most logical place to redirect the user is to their profile so that they can see their change, right? So base path slash users slash show.php question mark ID equals $user ID. And I'm using that because their ID won't change when we update them. Whenever you update something, the ID does not get modified. It stays the same. One more tricky thing to this whole thing. Remember how we changed the role and I said that it won't take effect with the current logged in user? They have to log out and log back in again. Exactly. Same issue with this. If the user updates their profile, they're not going to see their changes on their profile in the session. They will see it under their profile block, right? Because we're actually accessing the data from the thing. But if they were to change their email address and we wanted to use that at some later point as a way to verify them or anything, maybe send them an email, we would have to be careful because the user in the session is no longer clean. The user in the session is called dirty data, and I'm not making that up. That's literally what it's called. It's called dirty data, meaning that data is no longer consistent with what's in our database. So we actually should, respectfully, change the data inside the session to match. However, we only want to change that data if they're editing themselves. We don't want to accidentally take the administrator and now make them some user they randomly edited. That would be bad, right? So we have to make sure we do it the correct way. Yeah, we got time to do that. So this needs to happen before our session, but after execute. Change session user to new data if editing self. And the way we do this, we say if $user ID is equal to the logged in user ID. So if those things match, then take $_session, take $user. Hold on, let me try that again. Unset $user password because we don't want to store their password. And then make $_session user equal. How am I doing this? To $_post. So whatever currently in the post. So that means their first name, their last name, and their email address will now be the values in the post. And actually, this unset line, we don't even need that, come to think of it. That's just extra overkill for no reason. So you need those 3 lines. So that will only apply to users who are editing themselves. So basically anybody who's not an administrator. I think we'll save deleting ourselves till next week. I imagine there'll be some errors to fix. You guys are troopers. We've almost done 2 hours solid of coding. All right, one last thing to fix. Like I said before, administrators are allowed to edit other people. Users are not allowed to edit other people. They're only allowed to edit themselves. So we're going to add a little bit of conditional logic at the top that basically says, unless you are the person that you're editing, or you're an administrator, we're going to redirect you. So let's scroll to the very top of the page here. Right after the session start is where we're going to do it. Only admins can edit other people is the logic we're trying to write. So if $post ID does not equal $_session user ID, and you're not an admin. So if the post ID which is the user that you're trying to edit, does not match the user ID that you're logged in as, and you are not an admin, redirect to base path, which will literally just take you home. I'm not even going to be considerate enough to take you back to the edit page. You're going home. That's what's happening. All right, we good? Anybody not good? Anybody still typing? No? People are taking pictures? All right. Jump back to the browser here. Gonna refresh this. Let's type in Humphrey, Bogart. And I want to be cheeky. I'm going to change this email address to an email address that already exists. I'm just going to grab it from phpMyAdmin. Go to COM1006 users. And why don't I grab Alice here? Sorry, Alice. We're going to try to assume your address. I'm going to hit submit. Uncaught PDO statement. You have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL version for the right to use near @test.com. Ooh, yes, that is a good point. Let's scroll down to our SQL statement and I'll show you what the problem is here. These need to be wrapped in quotes because they're strings. So what happens is when we prepare this, it's actually taking whatever value and inserting it automatically. And you guys will remember this when you're writing out your SQL in your MySQL class. Anytime you have a string value, it has to be in quotes, right? So we have to do the same thing. The easiest way to do that is just highlight the word, like so, with the colon, and hit your quote character, and it will wrap them in quotes for you. So you have to do it to all of them except for ID. ID can be left the way it is. Okay, so first name, last name, email, and avatar need to be wrapped in quote characters. ID needs to remain a number, so don't wrap it in quotes. Not that I think it would not work. I think it still works. Once you've wrapped those in quotes, jump back to the browser, just hit refresh, hit continue. Why is it having an issue? @test.com at line 1. That's super bizarre. I wonder if this dot character is goofing it up. Here, I'm going to start over and see if we can see if it throws the error for everything. Oh, whatever. There we go. So the invalid parameter, number of bound variables does not match the number of tokens on line 96. So what happens is if these numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, don't match the number of times we're binding, then we'll have an error. Not sure why we have the error though, because we definitely only have 5 of them. We didn't actually make any changes. Let's just verify that we're not in here. Not in there. So this wouldn't be bound. Unless I did something silly. If not empty post password, do this. Let's just double check our SQL statement and see what it is. First name, last name, email, avatar, and the ID. That's correct. So that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Maybe it's the order. And it shouldn't matter. What the heck is happening here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can I not count? We're executing. We have 5. I wonder if one of these is empty. First name, last name, email, avatar, post, avatar, spelled correctly. First name, last name, email, avatar. First name, last name, email, avatar, ID. All right. It's up to you. We can take a break and you can come back and I'll figure this out, or you can leave and I'll post a little video message about why it wasn't working. Super weird though, because it is 5 parameters and I'm binding 5 times, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense that it's not working.
It's possible that also the video you can put all the, maybe like a list with all the files that we did today.
Sure. Yeah, like upload our current status, like our current state.
Yeah, all the fields.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to do that for lesson 6 anyway, so. Yeah, I can do that tonight. I'll post those all up for you. No worries. Upload. Let's figure out why this is not working though. First name equals first name. Try to call this. Are any of those missing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, no. Unfortunately, there's no breakpoints in PHP. Yeah. What I can do is spit out the next possible issue, which could be that we're missing the post data. That somehow some of the post data got overwritten, and it's not in a good way. So there's our post data. So we have ID 26, Humphrey, password is empty. That's totally fine. 1, 2, 3, 4 values. So that is all correct. Make sure the avatar is there. Avatar is there. Yeah. Yep. What's up?
It's my project for the final one.
Okay. What's it?
It's all about a website. Okay. So in this, there we have a page. Okay.
Yep.
And it is working in this. I have three pages. One is if we need all the fields. If we are
Okay.
using any of those.
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay. And I will work on that one, which you were saying that if if we have already logged in with one email, then we cannot. Another person cannot log in with the same
Exactly.
email ID.
Yeah, they can't use the
Okay,
same
that will
email.
work. But I have used some bootstrap files and I
Okay.
downloaded from them from the internet. So do you have any problem with them?
No.
Like, can I use?
No. If it's Bootstrap, no. It's only PHP. PHP has to be your own PHP.
I think like these are three.
Oh yeah. No, I don't care about
No
that.
problem.
Yeah, that's totally
And
no problem.
other code, that's my one. That's whatever I have.
Yep. As long as PHP is your own, then I don't care.
So and what I wanna know from you is that I'm not unable to get you the requirements which you have asked in our file.
The error message?
Let me see. That's, yeah. I'm not unable to understand that what you're asking us to do in this. Yeah.
So the parent-child resource pieces?
It's the ability to register as a general user.
Yep.
That's working in my project. I know.
Cool. Yep.
So ability to create administrative user. What's the meaning of administrative user?
So an administrative user, like for example in our project,
Yeah.
the administrative user has access to this users panel where they can actually manage users.
Okay.
Whereas a general user cannot manage other users.
Means the one who has created the website, he can bring any change.
Yeah, he can edit users and delete users and all that type of stuff.
Okay. So that to be done.
And that's literally all you need. You can literally take it from our project that we've been working on and dump it right into it.
And what's this one? Implement the user CRUD.
So general CRUD is create, read, update, and delete a parent resource, create, read, update, and delete a child resource.
So what can you give an example?
So if you had like, we will be doing this next week, but like think of like blogs, right? So you have posts, and then a post can have comments.
Yep.
So the post would be the parent, comments would be the children.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I got that.
So it's a one-to-many relationship. So you need to be able to edit the one, and you also need to be able to edit and do everything with the many as well. Does that make sense? We'll be doing it next week as well. That's flickering.
It's flickering. I don't know.
I think your ribbon cable that connects your monitor to your keyboard, there's something wrong with it. Probably. Huh? What is happening? Oh no. Yeah.
It's an error actually. It says this.
Call that undefined function bind param on line 54. Go to line 54. Because you're saying equals instead of the thin arrow. Yeah.
The way of writing functions or like.
Because it's not a function. So what it is it's an object. And you're accessing a property on that object or a method. Yeah, so we're kind of, that's the only problem with PDO. PDO is, this is now an object. When you do the prepare, it actually returns back an object. And then bind param is a method on that object. Yeah.
So it's like, and then those this colon are also functions, right? These ones. The way of writing functions in PHP. Like,
Yeah, kind of. So PDO is a class object, and it's not even a class object. It's a namespace. So weird. You guys haven't gotten into modules before, but so I can have a class, right? And I can call my class. I can call my class param string, but then I can namespace.
like C#.
Yes, C#, C++ does this as well. And now they're all under PDO, which means every one of these guys is under PDO. If I name a constant under here, which is what they've done, so they literally, if you were to look at the code underneath the hood, they have a define param like so, and then whatever their value is, I don't know what it is. So now, in order to reference this, you're always doing PDO : param. You get the idea. Yeah, it's because it's namespace.
But package in Java. Like
It's definitely different than those kind of languages. Yeah. Namespace, I've seen it in C++. I've seen it in PHP. Ruby doesn't use namespaces. They use something called modules. So they can actually, like, a module can contain as much as it needs to. Yeah, you just use, that's literally just the word module and whatever name you want. Yeah. Python, I think, has namespaces. A bunch of different languages do. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. Python has decorators. It's different. Decorators are way different. Yeah. Decorators are like, if this was a function, it immediately wraps all the code that's below it. And then you can actually have it pass whatever values from here into the decorator, and then the decorator can handle it. It's like, yeah, it's a little much.
So for this project, like, do we need to make it a portfolio kind of?
No, you do whatever you want.
So it doesn't
Totally whatever you want. Yep. It just has to be like a child-parent relationship as well, or parent-child relationship in it, and a user's management system, which we've already built.
Okay, similar to that, but it doesn't have to be a portfolio.
No, not at all.
Create anything.
Let her create whatever you want.
It has to person the code that this function.
It just has to have parent-child relationships. So yeah. Try to avoid doing the library scenario where it's author books. I get like 100 of those. Try to find something different. Yeah. No worries.